Greetings ladies and gents, welcome back to the Craft Hammer. I'm your host Stefan, and as before we're going to be doing some mini tutorials to help you, the new beginner who needs to know a few things about the hobby and get a grip with some of the basics. In today's video we're going to be talking about varnish. Now if you're unfamiliar with what varnish actually is, it is roughly a chemical compound that you then put on top of your model. Ideally it dries clear. If it starts becoming foggy, you know you've kind of messed up. And once it's dry on your model, it creates a nice protective layer which helps making sure that paint doesn't easily rub off or chip. And of course it helps keep away some of the moisture and some of the dust that will get on top of your model. So overall, why we do varnish on top of your models is to make sure that it is protected from any sort of dings, any sort of accident. Obviously you might drop it here and there, and the varnish really does help make sure that if you do drop the model, it won't chip and completely get rid of the paint that is on top. Now, quickly before we get too far into the varnish itself, as you may have noticed, we haven't done anything in regards to tufts or flowers on the base. That is because you want to make sure that you varnish your model before you do that, as once it hits those flowers and tufts, it will create a frosting effect which you don't want. So just to make sure that you understand, you put varnish on your model before you add any sort of flowers or grass on top of your base itself, just so that they don't get damaged once you put the varnish itself. Now, if you remember from our priming video, we did give you 3 ways of doing it. You can paint it on with a brush, we have a can, so you can spray it on, and of course we have the airbrush itself, where that you can also spray through the actual nozzle itself and get some varnish that way. Similar as to before, the brush on varnish is the least effective. You want a nice, smooth and clear coat, and the brushing on when it comes to both priming and varnishing is the least effective and most likely to mess up, so make sure that you go with a different method. Unlike priming though, the airbrush one is also not the best way to go, mostly because varnish can easily damage an airbrush, and especially some of the rubber rings and seals that an airbrush has, and because it does dry a lot stickier and a bit more tough than your average paint, it could clog up that airbrush much easier and more difficult to clean out than your average paint. So what is my recommended? A good old can spray. This is probably the easiest way and most effective way to get varnish onto your models without damaging an airbrush and getting a nice, clear and smooth coat. It's not that different from when you're doing priming. You want to get some quick, short bursts of the can around the model. Make sure not to oversaturate it, because unlike the primer, which maybe if you do a tiny bit heavy-handed on a primer, it can go into the cracks and hopefully it will smoothen out. If you do too much and heavy when it comes to varnish, it will start to go all cloudy and milky, and then it won't dry up clear, which is not ideal. So make sure that you have quick, short bursts of the can. If you need a bit extra, just let it dry first and then go back with a few more quick, short bursts. Now, there's 3 different types of varnish. You have gloss, which is obviously very shiny. You have satin, which is in the middle. It's a mix of both gloss and matte. And then of course you have matte, which does its best to get rid as much of the shine as possible. This will of course depend on your own preferences, but personally I've tried all 3, and I think that matte varnish is probably the best way to go. It helps blend in most of your colors so that there isn't as many stains or as many discrepancies when it comes to the smoothness of your paint. And unlike gloss, which really makes it look like a shiny plastic, the matte varnish itself makes the paint feel like it's a realistic metal or a realistic panel. Whatever you might be spraying on top, it definitely gives something that feels more normal when it comes to your eye, unlike gloss, which will then make everything shiny, and it doesn't seem normal that certain parts all of a sudden have this bright sheen to them which you wouldn't normally see in real life. So personally, definitely recommend matte varnish. Which brand do you want to get? There is a number of them out there. Obviously you have things from GW, from Army Painter, from Green Stuff World. They all have some sort of varnish. Personally, the one that I found which works flawlessly each time, unfortunately it is a bit more expensive than your average varnish, is the Winsor & Newton General Purpose Matte Varnish. For those of you who might know, Winsor & Newton is a art brand that does a bunch of paints and a bunch of, I believe, also paint brushes for normal art, so not just for models. And as such, they've definitely put a lot of thought and effort when it comes to this particular varnish, and I've never had any issues when it comes to the actual varnish. And as you might see from this specific model here, hopefully the light will show it off a bit better, it gave me a wonderful, smooth, clear coat on top and helps blend in a lot of these colors together to make sure that it seems more seamless and more realistic in the way that they're catching the light, and they're able to portray that warmth underneath without being too shiny and too plasticky looking. So personally, definitely recommend trying out Winsor & Newton. As I said, it is something that's a bit more expensive, but it's never let me down. Quick, short bursts, help smooth out and make everything nice, protected, no chips. I've dropped a few models now and again and honestly never had to worry about anything. They haven't had any rubbings off, they haven't had any chippings, so it's definitely my go-to brand, and I definitely recommend it for most people out there. Highly recommend making sure that you varnish your models once they are completely finished. Now, this model will not be ready for varnishing. As you might see on the back, we still have the backpack to finish off, so we're not really gonna varnish this model in this video. And we normally want to paint the rim black, as we can see on this one, because obviously it's been primed and had loads of other colors drip on it. So before this model is ready, we would paint the edge, make sure that the backpack is on, and then we would go and varnish it at the end. Hopefully this video has helped you out when it comes to varnish. Make sure to drop your comments down below if you need any more extra help or if you want some other tips on it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to like this video, really helps us out. We will have 1 or 2 more tutorials coming up soon, so do stay tuned for that. And until next time, take care folks.